Good afternoon, Tampa Bay. I'm Tom DuPont, publisher of the DuPont Registry Tampa Bay. We're here in the World International Headquarters for the DuPont Registry Tampa Bay, located on 140th Avenue in Clearwater Avenue North in Clearwater, across from the St. Pete Airport. Glad to have you with us today. We have a very special guest. It is Michael Lundy with a law firm local here called Older, Lundy, Alvarez, and Koch. A firm that's been in practice for how long, Michael?
We started in 2003 was when we founded the firm.
So you've been around a long time.
I have. It seems like it's longer than I can imagine at this point.
Flown by,
yeah.
though.
Yeah, it sure has.
You're busy. There's plenty of things that lawyers are needed for today. It almost seems like you want to start your car, you better call your lawyer first.
That is an unfortunate reality of the world we're living in, I think.
I think so. A litigious world, I think. Everybody can look that word up. So the Older, Lundy, Alvarez, and Koch law firm has been running with us in the magazine for a couple of months now and doing some Q&A for our audience to be able to look at. So we're going to do a little bit of that today. But Michael, tell us a little bit more about the firm, how long it's been around, how many lawyers, what your specialties are. Just give us an overview.
Sure. And thanks for having me today. We founded the firm in the beginning of 2003. We kind of did a little bit of everything when we first started because we were, quite frankly, just trying to make a living. And at that time, it was my partner, Ben Older, and I, and nobody else. We very quickly gravitated towards the marital and family law practice area. We realized that we had an affinity for it. We loved doing it. We were good at it. And we decided that we were going to pursue it pretty aggressively from a very early stage, probably by the end of '03. We quickly grew to be a very significant size family law practice by Florida standards. And then about 8 to 10 years ago, we decided that we were going to leverage some of the practice stuff that we had accomplished and we were going to expand into some other areas. And since then, we've just been going gangbusters in commercial litigation, personal injury. We do a lot of corporate work. We do tax work. We do really just about everything that's not hyper specialized.
Okay, and I think a little bit of commentary in one of the issues you were in the Q&A, we talked a little bit about the impact on our lives of COVID-19 and where a good rock-solid lawyer and law firm would be helpful to somebody who's watching our broadcast.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that our family law practice has just been about as intense as it has ever been during COVID. You know, after the first 60 to 90 days of shell shock that I think we were all going through, things picked up extremely quickly. We were always a high-tech office. We converted to, remote work very quickly, essentially overnight. We've designed multiple Zoom studios throughout several of our offices, and we've been conducting court proceedings and, client meetings and all manner of interactions using those Zoom studios now for the last 8 or 9 months. And we are as busy as we have ever been. The other areas of practice have also been quite busy. I mean, we're dealing with this insanely robust real estate market right now. There are corporate deals happening left and right. The world doesn't stop turning for tax purposes and other things. And so we've been busy across the board, very blessed to be able to say that.
You're right here in a hot spot, if you will, particularly for real estate transactions, Florida.
Yes.
And specifically Tampa, which has been a robust real estate market.
It sure has. And I'm amazed. Every real estate professional or developer that I speak with has told me they think that we are nowhere near the end of that, nowhere near the top of it, that Tampa is a place that's just attracting all sorts of talented and successful people, and that we're sort of early on in the growth curve.
Well, they cover the other details again. Whereabouts you got offices? Right here in the Tampa Bay area all over?
We do. We've got an office in Clearwater that we opened about 6 months ago. Our main office is in Tampa, very close to downtown, next to UT. We have an office in Trinity, we have an office in Wesley Chapel, and we have an office in Dade City.
So you're all throughout the area. Where have you seen the most growth? We're probably up north. Tampa and Wesley Chapel's just going off the Richter scale with business.
Yeah, those offices are about a year and a half old, and they've gotten very, very busy. Tampa continues to be explosive. Clearwater is really hitting its stride right now. So I'd say we'd see it across the board.
Right. And how many partners?
There are right now 4 named partners, myself, Ben Older, Rick Alvarez, and Kai Koch.
And a raft of assistants and PAs and
And other
everything
lawyers,
else.
yes. I mean, I think we now are approximately 25 lawyers across the 5 offices, and plan to keep growing.
Okay, so what do you view as the significant things you can trip over when you're talking about family law?
That's a long list.
I mean, it's a long list, but
yeah,
give us a couple of
sure.
important ones that people who are facing family law issues, aka divorce,
Sure.
can think about that would maybe give them just a little bit of a leg up.
So I would say that the first thing people should divorce themselves from, pun intended, is the notion that you're going to win. There's no winning. So the idea is to, try to find a fair and equitable solution to whatever the issues are as quickly as possible, and to make sure that you hire somebody who is of the same mindset. You want a lawyer who is a problem solver. You do not want a lawyer who is out there talking about fighting and winning all the time. That's really the option of last resort. The other thing I would tell people right out of the gate is to put your children first. If you make decisions that are truly and sincerely based on what's best for your children, you're probably going to make the best decision available to you, and you're going to spare your children a lifetime of very serious problems.
Let me ask you this. I think the court system is prejudiced in favor of the children when they're dealing with family divorce situations. They want the children taken care of.
They do, but it is a mistake to believe that a judge, as smart or as talented as he or she may be, is an expert in child development, and particularly in your child's development. I mean, your child is unique, like every other child is unique. Your family is unique, and to the extent that you think that you're going to go in and lobby this stranger to do what's truly right for your child is misguided. People really need to be thinking about solving those types of problems with their partner. Because if you can't do it now, then you're not going to be able to do it in the future. And even when your divorce case is over, you're going to continue to have problems.
That must go on in a lot of cases. I know the collaborative divorce initiative is a good one, where you get people to start talking about how to cooperate, not how to protect their own little backside
Yes.
and going forward. Corporate law, what are the big issues in front of a corporation right now? Probably HR is the big one.
Well, there is a lot of that. I mean, I think people are dealing with a lot of tax issues because we're in a rapidly changing landscape. There are all sorts of, lending and financing things that need to be adjusted and addressed right now as people are having difficulty, operating their businesses in the normal sense. And then there's, where there's volatility, there's also opportunity. So
Yes,
when you
indeed.
see, business revenues rising and falling rapidly, you start to see acquisition activity pick up.
I think the acquisition market has turned up the volume pretty significantly in the last, particularly at the end of the year. It kind of took a delay while I was waiting for the election and what the fallout would be from that. Fallout's probably not a good word. But at any rate, to get into this next year, get an administration in place, and now it seems to be inching back up a little bit and becoming more active because they can look forward and see where the ground is going to be.
Yep, and I think I think people make a lot of predictions leading up to an election, and then when those predictions start to ring true, they start to feel a sense of comfort again, and then they get aggressive in their growth strategies again. So, right now, depending on what industry you're in, I mean, if you're in financial technologies right now, what a great time to be in that business. I mean, just think about the amount of technological advancement that's occurred in such a short period of time because of COVID. Things like grocery delivery and how those transactions are processed, and those types of technologies. I mean, think about what has happened to Amazon's business, which was already gargantuan, right?
Yeah,
Think about in the
absolutely.
last 9-10
Yeah.
months how good that's been for them, and that's a very long list.
So I'm sure there's been some interesting and maybe oftentimes humorous events that have occurred during your career and during the cases that the law firm has represented. I don't need to name any names, but there's got to be something that when you think back really makes you chuckle that happened. You got a story for us? Everybody's interested in it.
Sure. I mean, it's a little bit off color, but we'll try and keep it PG-13. Many
you.
moons ago, we had a woman who was coming in for a divorce case and was complaining that she was having some burning in her private area. And, we explained to her, look, this is a law office, not, an OBGYN's office. You might need to go see your doctor. And she went to see the doctor. She continued to complain about this. They couldn't figure it out. Change soap, change detergent, change this, change that. To make a long story short, what we ultimately discovered was that her husband, who was a fairly insane person, was crushing up habanero peppers that he was growing in his backyard and rubbing them in her underwear every day.
What a pleasant man.
What a really, really unpleasant man. And, we deal in a world where there is some significant mental health issues from time to time. And, now we look back on it and we can chuckle about it a little bit because it's just so off the rails crazy. There's nothing else you can do. But, that's emblematic of what happens when human beings can be at their worst. And then I want you to know, I have to couple that with sometimes we get to see human beings at their absolute best. And that's probably one of the most rewarding things that we get to do.
I would assume you've got an estate to be settled in a divorce, and you've got some compliance on both sides and understanding of each other's needs. You've got an interest in their children that they both share. You bring them to the table, and you're talking just about balance.
You really are. And, sometimes the biggest problem is that, people just have great difficulty seeing things from a rational perspective at such a difficult time in their life. And so to me, what makes the difference between a decent lawyer and a great lawyer is that a great lawyer can help somebody interpret the events that are happening in real time with a sense of tranquility, right, and rational objectivity, right, and allow somebody to look at their options and to make the choices that are best for them in the long term, even though it doesn't feel good today.
So I know there are 4 or 5 points in the collaborative divorce law that are always important that you listed in the magazine. So have we covered all of them, or is there something else you need to add in that you want somebody to focus on?
I would add one more thing as it relates to the collaborative law movement in particular, which is that in a collaborative divorce case, there's a huge emphasis on the involvement of a mental health professional. And if you think about it, right, we live in a system now where our courts are expected to resolve family disputes like they would resolve a real estate dispute or a contract dispute between two businesses, which quite frankly is absurd. So these types of problems, especially ones that involve children, especially ones that involve people who are suffering from distress and other issues that are mental health in nature, they should be properly resolved by mental health professionals, or at least with the serious input of mental health professionals. And collaborative divorces, rely very extensively on mental health professionals.
So, not naming names again, give us an example of a mega settlement in a divorce. We got millions of dollars going back and forth. There must be somebody that, after it's all said and done, she had to have the dog and he had to have the Jaguar.
Oh, man, it is amazing. You would think that some of the enormous cases where there's an enormous marital estate would be so easy to resolve. Yeah. But what I have found, unfortunately, is that usually when people get to a mega wealth status, there is some underlying stuff going on that drives somebody to get to that level. And those are people who don't necessarily do a lot of compromising along the way. I mean, a person who becomes a billionaire is a person who doesn't typically make a lot of compromises along the way. And so they solve problems from that kind of dominant perspective. And you're absolutely right. It can come down to who's gonna keep this giant schnauzer. Yeah.
I'll give you my favorite layman's divorce story, and you can weigh in. This is a gentleman, old friend from years ago, second wife. They had a wonderful start to their marriage. He lavished jewelry on her, everything you could think of. She had the most fabulous jewelry you could imagine. 10 years went by. They kind of fell off the wagon, didn't like each other, got in a screaming match or two, finally decided to get divorced. She said, I want the jewelry. And he fought her pretty diligently for a while and then gave up, said, you take the jewelry. The divorce was settled, bang the gavel, everything's done. 2 months later, she comes back to her lawyer and says, I have a problem, and I am furious. Somehow, my husband substituted all of my valuable jewelry with fake jewelry. And this guy privately would confide in his friends and say, when things were going south, I took every piece of jewelry, went down to the jeweler, had fake stones put in for the real stones. The real stones I sold. He didn't have them anymore. And she got her jewelry just the way she wanted it. And I had to chuckle. That's vindictiveness if I've ever heard it. But a little bit of planning as well, because he knew it was going to happen.
We do see some of that. And I caution anybody. I mean, divorce planning almost never works out if your spouse gets a good lawyer. So you are better off just making a reasonable deal and trying to move on with your life.
Pick a point in time and make a deal based on that situation and time, and go for the best deal you can get. Not the best deal you can get, but a deal that is acceptable to both sides.
That's right. One you can live with.
Okay, so back all the way up in the career, where did we go to law school?
I went to University of Miami Law School in Miami, Florida, and graduated in 1999.
Well, that seems like a long time ago.
It sure does.
And I'm going to make an assumption here. Everybody passed the bar on the first try. That's not always true, but
yeah. And I actually, when I first graduated law school, I practiced in Georgia. I had to sit for that bar. Then I moved to New York. I had to sit for that bar. So I actually had to go through it 3 times.
Wow.
Probably could have taught the class.
And it takes a lot of studying, a lot of devotion, a lot of focus to get through law school and then get through the boards.
It does.
So in the state of Florida, we must have, it seems to me like every time you turn around, millions of lawyers.
Too many, if you ask me. Too many.
Absolutely.
Not enough good ones, but too many in the aggregate.
And once you pass the bar, you can hang your shingle on the side of an RV. If
that is exactly right, and some people do.
And then you can start advertising on TV. Who amongst us doesn't see the ads on TV in the morning? You're having your morning cup of coffee. It's either a car dealer or a lawyer. I don't think it is anybody else after that.
I mean, they know who they're advertising to, so they pick those times. There's no question.
Yeah, it's repetitive advertising. You're just trying to get that brand name in front of you, and you can sure remember it by lunchtime. That's for sure. Well, Michael, this has been an interesting conversation for everybody, and I'm wondering if you have any advice on like traffic accidents when somebody is involved in an accident and all of a sudden you don't know whether you're guilty, not guilty. Just stand up there and take your medicine?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? I mean, I would say if you're concerned about being guilty ever, then you ought to call a lawyer before you start talking to anybody about anything. It's always a good idea if you're concerned about having liability of any kind to talk to a lawyer before you start talking to anybody else.
I would think so. Call your lawyer, and that doesn't mean you're in an orange jumpsuit with cuffs on and
Correct.
say, I need my lawyer.
It's just wise.
And also, the less said publicly, the better. You want to talk to your lawyer and find out what the rules and the barriers are and what the box is that you can talk in.
I think that's a principle that probably applies to a lot more than just traffic accidents, if you think about it.
Okay. So any big corporate deals in town that you were an architect with, or where we saw a merger?
I mean, they are big deals, but they would be obscure and nobody would know who we were talking about. I mean, we did a huge acquisition for a giant plastic manufacturing company not too long ago. We've done a couple of other M&A transactions in the last couple of months that have been, $50 or $100 million deals. I mean, there's just a lot of activity right now.
It's crazy. It's going on like crazy. It's interesting to talk to you and get some view of the legal environment that we live in, and also the area that we live in, where there's an awful lot going on. So, Michael, tell us again your locations. Let's do the commercial. Give us a phone number and email address so we can find you.
So we can be found at olalaw.com, and our mainline phone number is 813-254-8998. And we have offices in Tampa, Clearwater, Trinity, Dade City, and Wesley Chapel.
And your recommendation is that if you think you have a legal problem, to call your lawyer.
Absolutely.
Then he will tell you whether you do or you don't, and you can say thank you for the advice and hang up
because
you don't. Or you can say, gee, sounds like I do. How do we get together?
That's the best. That is the best call, when you call a lawyer and they tell you don't really have a legal problem, actually.
It's amazing that a lawyer would give you advice that you don't need me. You don't want to hire me. And there are lawyers that don't follow that credo. They'll
Good,
say,
for
yeah,
sure.
come on in. I need to charge you by the hour to look through this, and there's nothing going on
Listen,
there.
one of my favorite things to say to people when they come in for an initial divorce consultation is that, you don't have an interesting case. And candidly, you want your divorce lawyer to tell you you don't have an interesting case,
Absolutely.
because interesting cases can be very costly and lengthy.
Absolutely. I got to ask one other question of experience. Any client or opposition just flee out of the market, head for Luxembourg, South Carolina, wherever else you might go to hide from
Once
the
we
law?
had one guy who owed a very, very substantial amount of money to my client for unpaid support, and he fled to Colorado. And my client eventually had to hire Colorado counsel. And sooner or later, unless you go to Luxembourg or Switzerland or somewhere of that type of a nature, you're going to end up paying. So you might as well just work it out.
And you might as well work it out and get a plan to pay it back, even if at the moment you run out of money, but you still have that obligation. You can always appeal and say, look, I need longer time to pay, or a little less up front, or whatever it is. People, I think, understand that if you're asking a reasonable question.
It is no different than dealing with a bank or another business associate. If you are unable to meet your obligations, then you need to sit down and think about how to negotiate a compromise solution. But running from the problem is the worst possible choice.
Yeah, well, even that's good advice for your children, too. You better face the issues, because running away isn't going to help you.
That's true.
All righty, Michael. Thank you for coming in today, being on Tampa Bay Talks with the DuPont Registry Tampa Bay. Michael's with the law firm of Older, Lundy, Alvarez, and Koch. They're located here in Tampa. He's ready to take your call. You've got the email address, the telephone number. If you're facing a legal question, I recommend you call Michael. So it's been a good chat with you today. Thanks for coming in, and we appreciate all of you joining us over the next week while you'll be tuning in, watching us on tape. And we want you to be safe and be thoughtful out there of your neighbors and your friends. Wear your mask in public, as we're doing today. And we sincerely hope that you have a happy and safe 2021. With that in mind, it's Tom DuPont, publisher of the DuPont Registry Tampa Bay, and I only have one thing left. Go out and make a great day, Tampa Bay.